Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to learn how to paint simple little oranges with gouache paint. So if you haven't used gouache before, it's like acrylic paint. It's opaque like acrylic paint, but it works more like watercolors. So it's absolutely lovely. I love it. It's really creamy. Yeah, so we're going to paint some simple little oranges and then we're going to turn them into a pattern for wallpaper and things like that. My name is Mackenzie Nelson. I'm a fine artist and licensed pattern designer, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. So this is my desk right now, my area. This is what I've been working on so far. This is going to be a wallpaper design. This is basically going to be what that design is. So this is all gouache. This is what I've been using to paint these designs for the wallpaper collection. See, this right here is going to be a part of this wallpaper design here. And what we're going to work on tonight is we're going to paint the oranges for this wallpaper pattern. So when I ran out of watercolor paper, I don't know why, but I decided to get a big sketchbook full of watercolor paper, which is nice because I can rip them out. I also like the idea of having them all in one place, but I found that it's kind of a pain to work with to paint while it's attached. So I do have a lot of paintings in here. Now these are all for, basically most of them are for patterns. So I paint the motifs separately and then turn them into patterns later. I do have some illustrations in here as well. Okay, so first we're going to start out by sketching the oranges, and what we're going to be putting here is basically just oranges and then leaves and probably some orange blossoms. It's important to remember that because we're not creating a painting, but we are creating individual elements that that I will be manipulating later to make into a pattern. So they're going to be kind of random and spread out throughout the paper because I'm keeping the pattern layout in mind in the future and how I'm going to need to use these different elements. Now I thought about using like something to trace the orange circles, but I kind of like the idea of them not being perfectly round because what oranges are, right? So out in nature they are going to be all different shapes, and we're also going to be looking at them from different angles. These are actually pretty good circles. I can never draw a good circle. And I was maybe going to paint the leaves onto this as well, but I might actually bring in another separate piece of paper to paint in the leaves because I want to leave breathing room for the oranges. Okay. I think that's all we're gonna do here. So since we're painting with gouache, we don't need to worry too much because gouache is pretty opaque, but I do want to use my kneaded eraser here. I'm going to knead it a little bit so that I can just kind of soften it up and clean it up. I'm going to use this to lighten up the marks, to lighten up the outlines of the oranges because I just don't want to show through the paint. So I'm basically just rolling this kneaded eraser across the little sketches, and it's getting rid of most of the graphite, so it just leaves a little ghost of the orange shapes. Okay, because this is kind of a vintagey looking pattern collection, I'm not going to go with like bright oranges. So for example, this is some orange gouache that is just straight out of the tube. We're not going to use that. What I have instead over here, as you probably noticed, I've got these little jars which I mixed paint for a pattern collection and an illustration collection a couple months ago for a December, like a winter collection. And these jars are awesome because I mix whatever colors I want and then I put it into these jars and I mark it on the top, and I have my own custom made colors. So we're going to start off with this orange that I made, and it's a much duller orange if you can tell the difference. So I'm going to take some out of here. Kind of dried out a little bit, but we're just gonna scoop some out and we're gonna put some right in here. Now this is still maybe brighter than I want it to be, but you know what, actually no, we're gonna go with this because I do like this orange, and I can still change it up afterwards, after the fact, in Photoshop when I'm actually making the pattern, which is really fun to do. So I'm actually just gonna wet it a little bit, and we're just gonna make a few different variations with the same orange. So I'm not painting these oranges like they're super realistic. They're gonna be a little bit like almost like an orange that would be printed on a textile, or maybe an orange that was block printed. If you know William Morris and his style, I just love his work. So we're not gonna mimic his work, but we're gonna do something kind of similar. I'm gonna take a little bit of this, oh, it's kind of like yellow ochre, but maybe with a little more green mixed in. We're gonna add it to all of them. I like that, what that does to that orange. Makes it a little softer. So we are kind of toning it down like I mentioned at the beginning. So now I'm going to try taking this yellow and I'm going to mix it in with these. Okay, so now we're actually going to bring in some white, and I'm going to put a little bit over here just so I can grab from it a little easier. So you can see the difference between the two. So I think that's a pretty good starting point. We may mix more later as we're painting them, but we'll see. All right, let's go ahead and start painting them. Okay, so first we're going to start with the darkest color. We're just gonna go in and paint that, fill it all the way in, all over. So if you're wondering, this paper is hot press paper, and I hadn't really used hot press paper before up until this last year. I was doing some research because I started to see that there were different types of watercolor paper, and I had always my whole life used cold pressed, which is the really textured kind of watercolor paper. But when I started scanning in artwork for patterns, I realized that they scanned in a lot easier, and I was able to like remove the backgrounds a lot easier when the motifs were painted on smooth paper, because it left a smooth edge. And so I still love the textured look of cold pressed paper. It's really nice, but again, for this purpose, the hot press works better for me for the look I'm trying to achieve in my patterns and illustrations. So before we go on to the next color, the next layer, we're gonna want this to dry completely. Because like I said, we're not gonna be doing a lot of blending. We're not gonna be doing any blending. We're gonna be making it look almost like a block print or textile where the colors will be kind of separated. As you can see, the oranges are just about dry. There are a few spots that are a little bit damp, but we will go ahead and wait till those are done, and then we'll start adding on the lighter colors. Now we're going to draw in the leaves for the pattern. Now that we've drawn the leaves, we're going to draw some orange blossoms here, because I do think we're going to want some on the pattern. Okay, so that is ready to go. We're going to set that aside because our oranges are dry. So now we're going to go ahead and put in the highlights and the details for these. So what I have been using so far is the Princeton Velvet Touch Filbert brush in number 8. Now, if you haven't ever used these Princeton Velvet Touch brushes, they are so good. Now, this isn't sponsored. I'd love to be sponsored by them eventually, but this, yeah, it's so silky smooth, like velvet, and they're just, they're really nice to work with. So that's what we've been using, but now we're going to go ahead and switch over to this paintbrush. Oh, it's also Princeton, didn't realize that. It says Snap, a number 2 round. I think this is going to be better for putting in the kinds of details that I want to have for these oranges. My water is getting really clouded. Gouache does dry pretty fast, and so when you have it over here in your palette, it's a lot like watercolors. You just have to re-wet it. When I first discovered it, I fell in love because it's so creamy. I'm just going to start going in and putting like little dots. So I'm going to take this color that we have here that we were just using. I'm going to move some over to here to this next little well. It doesn't take much. And we're going to take some of the white that I have up here and mix it in. I I think I've decided that down here on the bottom side of the orange, we're gonna actually do something a little bit darker. Okay, there we have it. Now we're gonna set this aside and we're gonna mix the green paint for the leaves. So I've already been working with a palette right here that I've created, and so it's gonna be very much like an olive green that we're working with. And I'll show you right here. So this is part of the same collection, and so these are the two greens that we'll most likely be using for the orange leaves. So I took some of this green here in this jar and I put it there, and I added a little bit of the orange, but now we're gonna add in some of this yellow ochre. If you are interested in my art supplies that I use, I do have an art supplies list that I'll link below in the caption, and it has pretty much everything that I love using for my art business, and so I highly recommend downloading it. I've used other artists' art supply lists before and they were so helpful. If you'd like some ideas on what art supplies to get, go ahead and download my free art supplies list. So now we have our new colors, our new greens, and that's what we're going to go ahead and use for the leaf. Alright, so those are done, the first layer. What we're going to do while that's drying is we're going to paint in the little orange blossoms down here. The blossoms and the leaves. We're keeping them pretty simple because this combined with the oranges is going to look quite nice. So now that we've painted all of our orange and orange leaf and blossom motifs, I'm going to scan these in, remove the backgrounds in Photoshop, and then turn it into a pattern. So I'm not going to walk through all the details of that. Maybe in another video I will. Let me know if that's something you're interested in. But then you'll get to see the end result of what this pattern will look like. So like I mentioned earlier, this pattern is going into a collection of patterns that I'm designing specifically for wallpaper. But when I've completed this whole collection, it's going to go into my online portfolio, and then it will be ready to pitch to different companies out there to put onto their product. I do have some collections available with wallpaper companies right now, and this one may be joining one of those companies. We will see, but they will be available soon as wallpaper. If there is something else that you would like me to teach you on one of these YouTube videos, please let me know in the comments down below, because that will help me to know what kind of videos I can continue making. Thank you guys so much for being here. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and then hit the bell button so that you can be notified when I have more videos being released. I do plan to release a video I'm shooting for once a week in 2025. Wish me luck. Thank you for being here.